think. Yeah. I'm just living how I'm living.
You just what?
And I'm just living how I'm living, yeah.
Hello everyone, so we're going to make steak tips and potato slices today. These are the ingredients that I use. You can use other things to season, but this is what I use. So now I'm going to show you guys how to chop your potatoes. So I always cut the ends off only because I don't like them, but you can keep them if you'd like. Now in terms of how you're going to cut them, you don't want to cut them too thin because then they burn in the air fryer or the oven, but you don't want to cut them too thick because then they take too long to cook. And this is supposed to be quick and easy. And then when you're done cutting them, you are going to put them in a bowl of cold water. All right, so I'm going to just finish up with all the rest of the potatoes and then we'll be back. All right, so now you have your potatoes in the cold water. You're going to add your cup of ice because you want it to remain like a chip when you put it in the air fryer. Okay, we're going to move on to our steak. So I bought Petite sirloin. You can buy other cuts of steak. Usually I just make the whole steak, but for this tutorial, I am going to make steak tips because it's quicker. So take your steak out of the wrapping and then put it on paper towels. The reason I do this is because you want to dry your steak so that it cooks evenly when you put it on your pan or your skillet. So you just put each steak on its own paper towel, wrap the paper towel so it's nice and dry. Usually I use 2 if I'm going to make the whole steak, but since I am going to be cutting this, I just used 1. You do this for all of the steaks that you're going to make. I made 4. All right, it's time to make our butter mixture. So you're going to take butter. I like to use bar butter, non-salted. I take that out and I put it in a sandwich bag or a little Ziploc bag, however you call it. And I just chop it up. I put it in there. I smush it to the bottom. I add my parsley. And I do like to chop up fresh garlic. You can use the minced garlic that they sell that comes in the little plastic container, but I prefer mine fresh. You want to mix it together. You don't want to put too much parsley. You want to just have a good amount where it has some parsley and it has enough garlic, and you want to mash it all together. All right, now that you mashed everything together, you can push it to the bottom of the bag. The reason I do this is because it's easier to cut out of the bag because you're obviously not going to reuse this sandwich bag. So I push it all to the bottom and then I roll it like you do your toothpaste when there's only a little bit left and you want to get the most out of it. That's the only thing I could think of right now. But I roll it into that kind of shape to make sure that it's all at the bottom. So now after you roll this up, you can put it aside or you can put it in the fridge. Usually when I'm making the whole steak, I put it in the fridge. For the steak tips, I'll just put it on the side. All right, so now we are going to preheat the air fryer. So I click the French fries, which is 400 degrees, and I put it to 5 minutes and I let it preheat. Okay, so now it's time to season the meat. So I take it out of the paper towels and I chop it up into the size of, the steak tips that I want. And then I'm gonna season them all up. They're all unwrapped. I'm going to chop one up with you guys and season it so you could see how I season it. So with the first one, I'm going to chop it up into the steak tip sizes that I prefer. I don't like when they're too thin, but I don't like when they're too thick either. So this is my preferred size. So it's time to season the steak. I start by using my Himalayan salt. You could use kosher salt. The only thing that I suggest is using a little bit less because Himalayan salt does tend to be a little bit sweeter. I then use black pepper. I've noticed that if you season it like enough, it always takes good flavor, but then when you don't season it enough, then it just tastes like nothing. So then you add garlic powder. I love garlic. And then I use adobo with the red cap. So this actually does contain salt. So just take that into consideration. Last but not least, the steak seasoning that I really like. And it has like onions and stuff in the seasoning, and then I add more pepper and a little bit more of the garlic. Now that the air fryer is preheated, I spray it with Pam so that the potatoes do not stick to the bottom. I have some spectators over there that wanted to be part of the video. But I then put my potato in. I try to shake off a little bit of the water, and then I put it into the air fryer. If it's your first time using the air fryer or even using this method, I would probably do a thin layer and do it multiple times, multiple rounds, just because you want to kind of get used to how your air fryer works and how the temperature is and what the perfect amount of crispiness you want your potatoes. But I don't do it that way. So I put a bunch for time and convenience. I just put all the ones I cut up in the air fryer, but I've made this a lot. All right, and then you get some olive oil and you put it over your potatoes. Don't use as much as me. I usually do like 2 capfuls, but my hand kind of slipped. But I do have a lot of potatoes. You then shake the olive oil over all the potatoes. I then grabbed my Himalayan salt. You can grab kosher salt or table salt, whatever you want to use. And I put it all over. Usually I use more than this, but I had to use less because my mom is pretty dramatic. And she was clearly watching. And then I add some black pepper. The reason you want to add more is just because potatoes, like, you know, they need more to take the flavor, and they're going to be in there for a while. So once it's done, I plop it in. I click the French fry button, which is the 400 degrees, and then I put it up to 20 minutes, and then I let it go. All right, so now we're back to the steak. I've already, now that I chopped it up and seasoned everything, I just mix together all the seasoning so that all the meat get the season, and then you can add more seasoning or so if you want to. Make sure you're washing your hands throughout. I don't record that part, but I'm most definitely washing my hands throughout this process. Steak time. I put olive oil on the pan all over, and then I just move it around so that it gets to all areas I couldn't get before, and then I let it warm up. All right, so now that it's warm, we can actually place the steak inside of the pan. I put it all at once. You could do it however you'd like. If you want to just do half and then do the other half, I just put it all in there, mix it around with whatever I used to put it in there, and then I just let it sit. After I let it sit in the pan for a little while, you can see some parts turn brown. That means they're cooking, so I want the parts that are still red to cook as well. Take into account how you like your steak as well, just to know how much you want it to be cooked. I like my medium, but I'm actually going to do it well done today. Voila, so it's been here for a couple of minutes. You can reassess if you need a little bit more seasoning. This is when I add a little bit more steak seasoning because I like the flavor, but you can decide to not add anything if you please. All right, so it's been 10 minutes, so we're gonna check on our potatoes. It's halfway now. I just shake them around just to make sure that they're not burning at the top. If you're doing a single layer, this is when you would flip them over. So now I'm just gonna add a little bit more salt and pepper now that I've kind of mixed them in and they've been cooking for a little while. Again, you want to add a good amount. I add a little bit because of my mother. All right, we can put it back in for the remainder of the time, so 10 additional minutes. Now we go back to the steak. I just kind of move it around to just ensure that it's cooking well and to make sure that it's not burning. Okay, so now I want to check how well done they are. So I take one out on a plate and then I slice it in half so I kind of see what it looks like on the inside. This would be a little bit overcooked for me, but my mom likes them well done. So for her, I have to leave them in a couple more minutes because even this would be undercooked for her. So I'm just going to put them back in there and I'm just going to give it a few minutes. I would lower the temperature a little bit. I just don't want them to burn because they can burn easily. And I don't want them to get too stiff because when they burn, they're going to get really stiff and hard to chew. So it's time to get your butter that we've already created. So you can take that. I used a knife to cut it, but you can actually use a kitchen scissor to cut it. And when it's frozen, it actually cuts way easier. So it took me a little bit of time because I just put it aside and then put it in the freezer in the fridge. And then we're going to add that to our steak. Chop it up in small enough pieces that you can add multiple pieces to different parts of the pan so that all of the steak gets seasoned with that butter and that garlic for delicious flavor. All right, so my potatoes are all done. As you can see, they're nice and crispy, just like I like them. So they're ready to be taken out. So I'm going to take them out and plate them now. My steak is already finished. So now it's just putting it on the plate. I add a couple of potatoes and a couple pieces of steak. I also make mayo and ketchup mix that I like to put on my potatoes. So voila, this is the finished product. I hope you guys enjoyed my instruction and my recipe. Let me know if you try it. Please tag me. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day, a wonderful weekend or a week. And yeah, see you guys next time.